I sat on the sofa in Ethan's rental apartment, clutching the pieces of the paternity test report that I had torn up and glued back together. My fingertips repeatedly brushed over the words, "no blood relationship," and a cold chill crept from my fingers up through my veins to my heart. The Los Angeles sun outside was dazzlingly bright, with palm tree shadows swaying across the lawn, yet I felt as if my entire body was submerged in ice water, even my breath carried a biting cold. Half a month earlier, I was still the young lady who could do as I pleased in our Beverly Hills home. One noon, I thought Martha's pan-seared filet mignon was overcooked, so I slammed the bone china plate onto the floor. Shards of porcelain scattered all over the carpet. My younger brother Ryan had just come home from his private high school, and I snapped at him, "Go buy me a Wellington steak from that Michelin 3-star restaurant on Beverly Boulevard. You have to be back in 20 minutes, or I'll make you sleep on the guest room floor tonight." Ryan frowned and argued, "Sis, that place has a line right now. It'll take at least 40 minutes round trip, 20 minutes is impossible." I grabbed a velvet pillow from the table and threw it at him, stubbornly retorting, "I don't care. If you don't bring it back, you'll get your allowance cut this month." In the end, Mom, Sophia, stepped in to smooth things over, telling the family driver to take Ryan to get the steak, and I finally let it go. That same afternoon, I was craving Swiss imported dark chocolate, so I snuck into David's study to look for it. The bottom drawer of the mahogany bookcase was slightly ajar, revealing a corner of a document. I thought it was a list of cigars Dad had hidden away, so I excitedly pulled it out, only to see the bold words, "paternity test result," staring back at me. I chuckled to myself, thinking, Dad's finally starting to suspect that this troublemaker isn't his biological son, huh? But when I read the details, test subject 1, David, father, test subject 2, Lily, daughter, result, exclusion of biological relationship, the document slipped from my hand and landed with a thud on the carpet. My mind went completely blank, as if struck by a heavy hammer, and my ears buzzed. I didn't even hear Ryan calling me to eat the steak when he got back. I frantically picked up the document, hid in the walk-in closet, and locked myself inside. Staring at the line that said, "no blood relationship," tears poured uncontrollably down my face. I thought back to all the things I'd done before. I'd played with Mom's new scented candles like toys, nearly setting fire to the master bedroom curtains. I'd deliberately hidden Ryan's AP exam review materials in the garage storage box, making him panic endlessly. Dad had brought me a limited edition Hermes bag from his business trip to New York, but I thought the color was too dull and casually gave it to a classmate at school. I always took it for granted that Mom, Dad, and Ryan would tolerate me. But now I realized, I was just a fake heiress who'd taken someone else's place. If they found out the truth, would they throw me out of this poolside villa like trash? Would Ryan, who'd long endured my bullying, drag my luggage out to the street in the middle of the night? The more I thought, the more terrified I became. I frantically tore the document into pieces, then clumsily glued it back together with tape through my tears. The tape was stuck crookedly, covering some of the words, but I didn't dare throw it away. I could only sneak it back into Dad's drawer and pray no one would find it. From that day on, I was like a different person. When Mom told me to go to bed early at night, I used to say, "I'll scroll through social media for one more hour," but that day, I immediately put down my phone, turned off the crystal bedside lamp, and didn't argue at all. Mom was stunned for a long time, even reaching out to feel my forehead, thinking I had the flu. At dinner, Mom put a forkful of organic spinach on my plate. I used to frown and pick it out, but that day, I ate it obediently and even smiled, saying, "Mom, this tastes really good." Ryan looked at me with an expression like he'd seen a ghost, and whispered to Mom, "Mom, is Sis possessed by something?" I even held back my temper with Ryan. One day, when Ryan came home from school, his backpack accidentally brushed against my custom-made dress. He panicked and apologized immediately, afraid I'd lose my temper. But I forced a smile and said, "It's okay, just a small stain. It can be fixed at the dry cleaners. Ryan's eyes widened in shock. He didn't recover for a long time, and finally whispered, "Sis, if you're not feeling well, just say so. Don't force yourself." But the grievance and fear in my heart were like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I had no one to talk to, except Ethan, the underprivileged student I'd been sponsoring for 3 years. He was a student at UCLA, and his family lived in a small town in the Midwest with poor financial conditions. I booked a private room at my favorite French restaurant in Beverly Hills, dragged him there, and cried on his shoulder for 3 whole days and nights. I told him I was going to be kicked out of the house, that I'd no longer have money to sponsor his tuition, and I sobbed about my Chanel bags, my Bulgari jewelry, my Canopy princess bed, and my limited edition Disney plush toys. I poured all my fear and resentment onto him, wiping my snot and tears all over his faded cotton shirt. But he didn't say a word, he just sat quietly with me, even asking his professor for leave and putting off his lab project at school. The more I cried, the more wronged I felt, and the more I saw Ethan as my only anchor. He was always like this, quiet, but extraordinarily patient. Whenever I was in a bad mood, I'd go to his rental apartment near Chinatown, throw my shoes aside, fling my coat over the sofa, and complain that his fabric sofa was too hard. But when I came back the next day, the sofa would be replaced with a soft pink one, exactly my favorite color, as fluffy as a cloud. I'd casually mention that my water mug was ugly, and the next time I visited, there'd be a new ceramic mug with a line art dog on it. There was always a pair of pink fuzzy slippers by the door, and a neat stack of cashmere blankets on the sofa for me to cover myself with when I got tired of scrolling through my phone. I thought he was just thrifty and grateful, but I never wondered, if he relied on me to pay his tuition, how could he afford all these things? On the 3rd night, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep on the sofa. In my dazed state, I felt someone cover me with a thin blanket, wipe my eyes with a warm towel, and gently tuck my messy hair behind my ears. I opened my eyes and saw Ethan sitting beside me, staring down at me with his fists tightly clenched, as if he'd made a firm decision. But I was too sleepy to ask, and soon drifted off again. When I woke up the next day, Ethan was gone. He didn't answer my calls or text messages. I went to UCLA campus and his lab to ask about him, but his classmates said he'd taken a long leave and gone back to his hometown in the Midwest. My heart turned cold instantly, so he'd also abandoned me once he realized I was falling on hard times, afraid I'd cling to him later. I was furious and heartbroken. I rushed to his rental apartment, wanting to smash all his things, but when I saw my own traces everywhere, the sneakers I'd left by the shoe cabinet, the wool coat hanging on the rack, the blanket I loved on the sofa, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I sat in the apartment for the whole afternoon, feeling more and more sad, until I cried myself to sleep on the sofa. When I woke up, the Los Angeles sunset had painted the sky orange, and its glow spilled over the floor. I noticed a sky blue floral blanket covering me. I clearly remembered using it as a pillow before I fell asleep. I comforted myself, I must have covered myself in my sleep because I was cold. Ethan was so ungrateful, there was no way he'd come back to take care of me. For the next 10 days, I tried to be good at home, but I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. On the 10th day, a friend called and told me Ethan was back. I exploded with anger, grabbed a stainless steel kitchen knife from the kitchen, and ran to his rental apartment. I was going to settle the score with him. While I was still the heiress, I'd teach this ungrateful guy a lesson. I kicked open the apartment door, and froze. The Ethan in front of me was nothing like I remembered. He was wearing a well-tailored gunmetal gray suit, a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist that glinted with luxury, his hair neatly combed back, revealing sharp, indifferent features. He exuded an air of nobility I'd never seen before. He was on the phone. When he saw me holding a knife, he paused for a moment, but didn't panic. He just said to the person on the other end, "We'll talk tonight," hung up, and turned to me. "Ethan, why are you dressed like my dad?" I blurted out, still holding the knife. Ethan's gaze flicked to the knife in my hand, and he held out his hand. That's dangerous. Give it to me. Only then did I remember why I'd come. I threw the knife on the floor, put my hands on my hips, and yelled, "Where have you been these 10 days? Did you find out I'm a fake heiress, so you ran back to your hometown to avoid me? You ungrateful, heartless jerk. I was blind to sponsor you." I got angrier the more I talked. I raised my hand to slap him, but he grabbed my wrist tightly. "That's not what happened," he said, his voice calm, giving away no emotion. "Then what's with this suit? You said you went back to your hometown, why are you all dressed up? Did you throw a party to celebrate getting rid of me?" I glared at him, tears welling up in my eyes despite myself. Ethan sighed, let go of my wrist, turned, and walked into the bedroom. I thought he was trying to avoid me, so I followed him, but saw him bend down, pick up a pile of things, and stuff them into my arms. I looked down, and my eyes were blinded by the sparkle. My arms were full of diamond-encrusted designer bags, heavy gold bracelets, and diamond and pearl necklaces, which slipped through my fingers and clinked onto the floor. "Where did you steal all this from?" I asked instinctively, a chill running through me. I recognized these brands. The money I'd sponsored him with wasn't even enough to buy half an Hermes bag. Ethan frowned but didn't answer. He just kept putting more things into my arms. I looked at his suit, and suddenly realized it was the same Armani style Dad had. Then I noticed his watch. It was even more expensive than Ryan's Rolex. A terrifying thought crossed my mind. He wasn't an underprivileged student at all. He was a wealthy young master. The humiliation of being tricked surged up in me. I grabbed one of the bags and was about to throw it at his face, when suddenly, strange lines of text appeared in front of my eyes. The villain still went back to be his terrible father's son, all for the female lead. Even though his dad is a real estate tycoon in Los Angeles, he takes his anger out on his son almost every day. He hits him really hard. Once, he even deafened one of the villain's ears. The villain left home, abandoning his young master identity, and became penniless and homeless. But at least he didn't have to be beaten by his dad anymore. Then he met the kind-hearted female lead. Too bad the female lead's fated male lead will appear soon, starting the fake heiress redemption plot. Poor villain, all that beating was for nothing. I blinked, thinking I was hallucinating, but the words were clearly floating in front of me. I froze for a moment, then suddenly remembered Ethan's ear. When we first met, his hearing was poor. If I stood on his left side and spoke softly, he'd tilt his head slightly to listen. I used to think he was being rude, but later I took him to the best private hospital in Los Angeles for a checkup, and found out his left ear was almost deaf. I asked Dad to find the most renowned otologist abroad to perform surgery on him. During those days, Ryan and I stayed with him. I even forced Ryan to memorize a book of jokes to tell him. Ethan didn't laugh, but I laughed so hard that I rolled around on the bed. Once, I almost crushed his foreline, and Ryan yelled, "Sis, are you trying to kill him?" On the day his stitches were removed, Ethan looked at me and clearly said one word, "Yes." It was the first time he'd spoken to us, and Ryan and I cried tears of joy, hugging him so tightly we almost suffocated him. I stood on my tiptoes, yanking open Ethan's shirt. What I saw made me gasp. His chest and back were covered in large purple and blue bruises, some still scabbed over. It was obvious he'd been beaten recently. "Are you out of your mind?" I cried, tears streaming down my face. "You went back to your dad, just for these bags? Do you want him to kill you?" I reached out to take off his shirt. "Are there more injuries?" "Let me see." Ethan stepped back, grabbing my hand, and shook his head gently. "It's okay. No more injuries. You don't need to look. It's okay. These bruises are so bad, how is that okay?" I stared at his wounds, my heart aching and angry at the same time. You know your dad will hit you, why did you go back? Just to buy these things for me? Are you stupid? Ethan looked down at me, his dark eyes filled with emotions I couldn't understand. I don't want you to live a life where you go hungry or can't keep warm, he said softly, but firmly. You like these things, I'll buy them for you. As I looked at him, memories of the past 3 years flooded back, the sofa he'd quietly replaced, the mug and slippers he'd bought, the 3 days and nights he'd sat with me while I cried, the way he'd covered me with a blanket and wiped my eyes when I slept. He'd been protecting me in his own way all along, and I'd never known how much he was carrying. But, the comments say my fated male lead will appear soon, I sniffled, whispering. All this beating was for nothing, wasn't it? The strange text was still floating in front of me. Ethan paused for a moment, then smiled and reached out to ruffle my hair. It wasn't for nothing. As long as you're safe and well, that's all that matters. I looked at the bruises on his chest, then at the designer bags in my arms. Suddenly, they didn't seem appealing at all. I threw the bags onto the sofa, threw myself into Ethan's arms, and clung to his waist, sobbing loudly. Ethan, don't go back to him anymore. I don't want these things, I don't want to be an heiress anymore. I just want you to be safe. Ethan's body stiffened for a second, then he gently wrapped his arms around me, patting my back softly as if comforting me. Okay, he said, his voice hoarse in my ear. I won't go back. From now on, I'll protect you. The Los Angeles sunset outside gradually faded, painting the sky a romantic shade of pink and purple. The lights in the apartment turned on, wrapping us in a warm glow. I knew my life would never be the same again. I was no longer the spoiled fake heiress, but I had someone who was willing to give everything for me. And as for that so-called fated male lead, I didn't care at all. Because I'd already found my own light.